No.
Hello, John. How are
Hello,
you?
Oliver.
So today we're going to talk about the past. If you want to go ahead there, and we'll have a conversation about it.
Yes, well, the past, people have different ideas about the past, but those of us that grew up of a certain vintage, and let's face it, I'm in my second childhood, and though I feel like a young fella at times, but the years have caught up. But funny enough, your brain upstairs can keep well, providing you've nourished it and haven't overdone things. The past. Now, what do we mean by the past? And we're going back to 1700, not at all. We're going back in our own time, what we remember. And we were often taught history in schools. And the history often gave me a bit of a bad impression, especially when it was about wars and the Irish. They always seemed to be losing wars with the invader from across the water, Britain. And I'd like to hear winning that. But there wasn't something in the Curlew Mountains. That was going back. But I'm talking about the past as I experienced it, and perhaps as you experienced it, Oliver. So now, apparently, the modern idea in this new secular world that we happen to be saddled with, who believe in nothing and criticise the past as if it was a dangerous area and we were lost and all the rest of it. And not just in this country, there's other countries at the same racket. And funny enough, in those countries like the United States, the past was for people that are old enough to remember it was quite good. Not what the commentators and the media are yapping about now. So I'll talk about the past. It's not going to be obliterated by John Malone and the Christian TV Ireland. We'll be talking about the past. We'll be talking about the mass rocks and all the monasteries and the great beauty that we had in this country and the cattle, the 550 monasteries. But be that as it may, I grew up at a time when the Catholic Mass was celebrated in Latin, and we were told that it was the universal language of the Catholic Church, not any other one. I don't think any one other church had it. Even the Orthodox, the Catholic Church had the Latin right, and it was called the universal language of the Catholic Church, and it was considered a good thing. And far from what the media, this anti-Catholic media yaps about in this country, and the print as well. It was a golden age, as far as I was concerned. I don't remember any of this, what they talk about, as if we were controlled by priests and bishops in the country. Far from it. It was a very free time, and you had great neighbours. These are the things that you remember. People knocking on your door, coming in. Have you got a bit of sugar? Now, these were all people that were working. My father was a guard, but the pay wasn't great them times. Nobody had a car except maybe the doctor and the solicitor, and maybe a bank manager. But the rest of them didn't have cars. They were lucky to have bicycles, or either that or walking, or going on the train if they were going anywhere, or somebody giving them a lift that was going up and that had a car. Sometimes hoteliers had cars. I often got a lift from Boyle up to Dublin, either in a lorry or something else when I was going up to Dublin. So these were the times we were living in. But it wasn't. You didn't think you were hard done by. You had friends, people calling to your door constantly, and doors open. None of this business of locks and all the rest of it. People were more friendly towards each other, more neighbourly. Can you say that nowadays with what they're trying to scrub the past? Can you say that you're getting knocks on doors? There's not people living very isolated lives in estates that they barely know the next door neighbour. As a matter of fact, I come across my late wife, Lord Mercer, come across the man when she was staying in, when she was doing a car test in Dundalk, and she stayed with this lad at a bed and breakfast. And he told the story like he had neighbours, and you'd imagine in Dundalk, which is a friendly town, that they'd know one another. But he was abroad on holidays, and he become friendly with a lad. And it turned out he was living kind of next door or a door or two down. He didn't know him. This is not that long ago, but in my time, growing up, until I was in the 30s, churches were packed. confessions were packed on a Saturday night. People never missed Mass. It was considered very poor form if you did. I don't remember anybody missing Mass. So all your friends were of the same way of going on. We got an education. I got an education, but it must have been hard for my father to pay for it. It wasn't a fortune, but it did cost. So people did as much good for each person as could, and you had good neighbours. You had all this. There wasn't this business of dog eat dog and all the rest of it. And you were lucky to have a bicycle. So that's what my father had been a guard for. He had a bicycle, lucky to have a bicycle. I don't think he even had the dynamo. There may be a lamp on it. And sometimes they'd be out when you'd be, after maybe going to the pictures, you'd give us pocket money too, 6 shillings a month, which was good because the money would have been scarce. So we were able to go to the pictures. But when you were coming home and you'd have your bike, well, maybe one lad might have a light. And so you're coming around. But I remember one night coming back from the pictures, that father jumped out from behind the ditch or something about these lights. Fellas have no lights on bicycles. And there was yours truly and other ones on the same character. So off you go. But it was that way in Clyde. And everybody knew everybody in the town, kind of thing. There was no distinction between young people and older people. There was none of this sort of teenage nonsense.
Well, I can tell you now, John, okay, that on the street where I live, okay, a person can, and this is in Dublin now, okay, and this is why I prefer the country, in Kerry, where I come from.
Yeah.
But the thing is, a person can die now on the street in Dublin, okay, in a house, okay, and the burial will take place, and half the street won't know that the person has died. And this is a regular thing in Dublin, okay? There's such a lack of community now, okay? And all this modernity and commercialism that we see all the time, okay? People have forgotten their neighbours completely. So this is why I like, in County Kerry, so when I was in Dublin a couple of weeks ago, okay? There was I met a man in the supermarket and he said, "Did you hear that Mr. Joe Bloggs died?" Okay? And I said, "Oh my God," because he was a good friend of mine. This was an elderly man. And I lived on the same road as him for 10 years, right?
Yes.
He was a joy to meet every day. Wait till you hear, right?
Yeah.
And himself and his wife, I didn't have to knock on the door, right? I could just walk in their front door, put on the kettle, make tea. And it was like being in Kerry, right?
It was.
And I was very, very disappointed.
It was a rare thing in some ways in Dublin.
I was very disappointed to hear 3 weeks later, okay, and I heard that he died, and I heard in a supermarket from one of the neighbours said,
"Good God!"
And I couldn't believe that half the road didn't know he died. That woman knew that he died, but she didn't even ring me to tell me he died. Okay,
there you are, you see.
And this is the thing. And then
they don't ring you. Somebody died that I knew very well, and I was surprised. A neighbour here, that I was in their house umpteen times. And I was going to Mass and Kilscare and other places there for a while. And I happened to be passing the house. I saw cars, and it was on a Sunday. I thought to myself, God, is there a funeral there? Because there was a thing called on the road funeral. But it was a Sunday. So she was actually going to the church on the Sunday. I had my dinner and went around to pay a visit. And there was nobody there. So apparently she was buried on the Sunday at 11:30 Mass, which is most unusual. Because that's the daily Mass on the Sunday. There's only one Mass. And normally a person would be buried on Monday. So I was surprised at being buried on a Sunday. It's not a common thing for a person to be buried on a Sunday. In my experience, I don't think it ever happened when I was growing up. But then you knew who in the country. But in Dublin, unless you lived in a village like Howth, where I grew up as well, where I had a lot of aunts and uncles, umpteen of them, and you were always in their houses.
Yeah.
And when I made my first communion, I got 17 and 6 because there were not one of them didn't get a visit, and I had a handout, and then neighbours that I might have done, it was in their house as well. So I landed up with 17 and 6, which was big money in 1950. In what year was it?
The 50s anyway, was it?
Well, no, it was even earlier than that. And if there was good money, so you'd get a sixpence or you might even get threepenny bit. But wherever it was, I had a pocket full of money.
What would 17 and sixpence?
It
16
was damn near a pound in old money.
Yeah.
Now, it counted for something because there was no such thing as inflation them times. You know, it was the pound, the Irish pound, and I think it was related to the English pound. So there was no inflation, and I mean, my father would have been a guard, and he would be earning only £9 a week. So take it in
Okay,
that,
wow.
yeah, take it in that way.
You got 10% of what he got.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Damn near. So like that gives you an idea, and you could buy an awful lot of stuff for it.
Nice.
But of course, I didn't get hanging on to it for some reason or another. It
You were a big spender.
Oh no, it was I might have got a tanner out of it.
Oh really?
Yeah, like with them times, money you gave it up to your parents.
Oh,
You
right.
weren't. It was a different thing now. Nowadays, I think that doesn't happen so much, but it did happen in my time. That you gave money up, and that money was given up to pay for things, because people's income was very limited, but they were able to buy and live and grow up, but they didn't have all the material stuff that they have nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
But they were damn straight happier because you were talking to people. You knew more people than you could shake a stick at.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And now, because it's only a few, but when you're down in the country with the Hopi, you know plenty of them.
Indeed.
You're from Kerry, a lovely county, a very scenic county, and lovely people. And so, I mean, you couldn't be in a better place. And I was in County Roscommon, Boyle, and Boyle was considered the friendliest town in Ireland.
Oh
believe it or
wow!
not, yeah.
And there was
And
probably
really,
was there a bigger population back then? In
it
Boyle?
was, and now it has dwindled because the family stores have kind of dwindled, and they're the lifeblood.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a tragic thing that has happened in many towns. They've declined like the deserted village of that Oliver Goldsmith, the poet, made about the deserted village. That's what a lot of them look like to me. That has been around them, and I think it's a shame. I'd certainly be, and we did videos about these things, and I think they should be rejuvenated, and multiples that have all this lies share, their market share should be limited to no more than 10%. I've often said this, so I'm just saying that again as regards what we were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Very good, very good. So listen, thank you very much. This is our first interview live, so
Yes.
hopefully we'll have a few more coming up, and
Yeah.
we'll continue to do our videos, and
you
you'll
get-
continue to do your prayers.
Correct. And did you get it more than Edgeways? Because once I get going, a story goes on to other things. You know, that's the beauty of living and having had the experience of that I've had down my life. And funny enough, it has stuck to me. I'm still at the same racket,
Well,
as if I'm living the way I was.
I heard of a thing called cunis, and when John Malone speaks, I think it's better to allow John Malone to impart his wisdom on the nation.
Thanks, Oliver. That's a good wish for St. Patrick's Day.
It
I
is
put
indeed.
that in up here in what they call the computer.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Oliver. See, we always have a little bit of a wait now, end stream. You see, if we get these things, we're not experts, sure we're not.